Good morning, everyone. It is February 10th, and I thought I'd give a map update of what is going on in Ukraine because in the past week or so, it seems like the Russian winter offensive is taking shape as major pushes were made near Kreminna, Bakhmut, and Vuhledar. The Russians made some gains, but the Ukrainian defenses held. So, really, the places we are going to be looking at include the Luhansk line of effort, which is here, Donetsk line of effort, which is in here, Zaporizhia line of effort here, and then also Kherson. Those are the main four that I'm going to focus on today to tell you what's kind of going on with this potential new Russian offensive that's taking shape. So we'll go ahead and move in here on the first one, which focuses on the Luhansk line of effort, which really is the line that runs between Svatov and, if I can get my pen to work, there we go, Svatov and Kreminna. So that this whole line right here is kind of where we're talking about this line of effort. So specific to Svatov, this is a big area for both Ukraine and Russia, obviously, because there's multiple avenues that come in, roads as well as rail comes in there as well. So the Ukrainians in any potential counteroffensive would be looking at trying to drive into Svatov and take it. Russians realize this, and so they've bolstered defenses there. There really hasn't seen a lot of changes to any kind of contact anywhere other than south of this way towards Kreminna. Kreminna being a big area of operations for Russia right now. So looking at Kreminna, we'll move up here. Elements of the Russian airborne, their regular ground forces, as well as some of the newly formed reserve battalions actually had made some advances, and I'll zoom in here for you guys so I can show you where these advances were here. Mainly you can kind of see them already. They're pushing in towards Torsk, as well as moving outward towards Yampolivka. So this is like the main Russian effort here in this area of operations. If they break through, it sets up a situation where the Ukrainian line, which sits in the Serebryanka forest, this whole area right here, this main line they have could break and be forced to withdraw behind. There's a river that runs right here, if you can see it. They'll have to withdraw and set up defenses on this river. Although the offensive push from Kreminna is quite well resourced by the Russians, the ground forces are still having a tough time breaking through the Ukrainian defenses. But that's not to say slow and steady Russian progress is not being made. It is. They are making progress, obviously, with this little bulge that's come forward. Really, the next week will determine how long the Russians can keep pace, as they are actually attriting forces at a quite alarming rate here. It's quite staggering the amount of forces they're giving up just to try to drive the Ukrainians to just a few kilometers to the other side of the river. This sets up potentially an attack into Lyman, but that's a long way down the line. So that's what we're looking at from Kreminna's perspective, and this is where the Russian offensive is currently taking place right now in the Luhansk line of effort. So moving on, we'll go to Donetsk, which is down here, and obviously the big news on Donetsk line of effort is what's going on around Bakhmut, as Bakhmut remains the main objective here. You see the lines there already being drawn with Bakhmut being right there. So when it comes to Donetsk, the scale, all of the focus and direction of Russia suggests they're trying to encircle Bakhmut to try and drive the Ukrainians out to take this whole terrain. Bakhmut remains strategically a big place for Russia to set up objectives for future maneuvers in the Ukraine theater. And it's really kind of unclear how long the Ukrainian forces continue to hold here, although they have done it very well. Outside of just the strategic need there, which isn't as great as really the political or the economic need, or even a cultural center, which would be a victory, at least in principle, for Putin. This area here does present some logistics potential for roads that converge. However, Russians have already taken the main crossroads there. However, even though this slow and steady progress is being made here, again, they're losing many soldiers. Wagner PMC is the main effort. There's Russian airborne and ground units, and they continue to make gains, but the fighting is fierce, and Ukrainians are holding every inch of territory as long as possible until they are forced to withdraw. The Russians are willing to pay a high cost for success here. The Ukrainian strategy of trading terrain for Russian lives still holds true, but both sides are stretched thinner than they prefer. Ukraine does continue to win most of the battles in Bakhmut, but given Russia's propensity for throwing human lives at a battlefield, they're willing to lose thousands for every 500 meters they take in this situation. So this is going to be a very bloody effort with many Russian losses, but you can see Russia is pushing forward to try and take Bakhmut while also trying to encircle it, as I've shown previously, to set up future operations and also secure lines of effort to help defend the gains they've already made. All right, now moving on to the Zaporizhia line of effort, which is down in this region. As we zoom out here, all right. That is mainly along the route, this line's here, okay? So the Russians continue to try to push and capture Orkiv, as well as other towns, Volodar, and they're, again, throwing many troops at this issue. The battlefield is very bloody, and it's unlikely in this region that Russia is going to be able to shift the strategy here. This is one area where Ukraine is quite strong. They need to ensure that at least defensive lines are set up here so that the Ukrainians cannot push downward and cut off what is essentially the land bridge to Crimea, because as you can see, this span right here that runs the length of the battlefield, or what the area of operations would be, is where Ukraine is focused to try to cut off any kind of supplies moving in towards Crimea for a potential effort later on in Crimea. Since January 24th, the Russians have committed 4 to 5 maneuver brigades with aviation, mass artillery to try to seize objectives in this region, but the Ukrainians have soundly defeated, and casualties have been substantial on the Russian side in both personnel and equipment. And I don't think the Russians can sustain a loss like they're taking in this region for long, but they will continue to feed troops and equipment with new attacks to gain control of some of the decisive points here. The newly raised Wagner units, as well as reserve units in this region, will probably continue to be employed here with massive losses, and Russia has no real clear path to victory as they try to take this area. Any potential failures in Russia opens up this whole region to Ukrainian counterattack and a threat to cut off the Crimea from the land bridge that runs through here. Now, moving on to the final one, which is Kherson, which hasn't seen as much fighting since Ukraine took all that territory in Kherson. Russia continues to just use defensive tactics along the Dnipro River, with a focus on controlling the delta, mainly so that they can interdict with potential naval forces. They try to control the region that exits into the Black Sea, and maintain what the status quo is right here. I don't think Ukraine's looking to push across the river. That would be an extremely risky endeavor, but rather push downwards and then sweep through, coming down from the north to south and then moving downwards towards Crimea. Now, if Ukraine can weather this offensive across all fronts, it sets up a strong position for a counteroffensive in the spring with the support of newly arriving tanks, Bradley's advanced missiles, and the additional 60,000 fresh troops that have been trained by US and UK. Russia knows this and is attempting to break through Ukrainian lines to effect a major battlefield victory and attrit Ukrainian forces before such a counteroffensive can take shape. Such efforts may have been premature by Russia, as they are likely still using poorly trained reserves in piecemeal, which contributes to Russia losing about 400 troops per day. Now, these offensive operations will see the numbers rise, but there's obviously no clear victor as of yet, and potentially what a Ukrainian counteroffensive later in the spring would look like.